The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Welcome into another midweek edition of the Spot Track Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here, along with the Grinch himself, Mike Ginnitti, and we'll dig into that detail in a moment. But a pre-Merry Christmas to you, Mike, and to all the listeners as well.
Same to you. Enjoy some time off, man. It sounds like you've been working your butt off over there.
Is that what this sounds like?
Yeah, it's just hard work. That's all it is.
I would love if I could spin it that way, but I have a 4-year-old who brings home germs I've never seen or felt before. So I will press on. Hopefully the sound of my voice isn't too irritating to those out there.
It's very radio grizzly.
I should be cutting commercials for Marlboro right now.
That's right.
So we're on to week 16 in the NFL season. Still a lot to be decided. The Ravens, Eagles, and Cowboys, they've all clinched a playoff spot. San Francisco has as well, but San Francisco is the only team thus far to clinch their division. What have you thought about the season as a whole? Just a grand view as we're almost wrapping up the regular season. The intrigue that we have here down the stretch. I know we've dealt with a lot of backup quarterbacks, so it's so hard to compare seasons because once we move off of a year, we have no recollection of it. But just in general, has this been a solid NFL season in your opinion?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm already into 2024, so I'm backtracking now to kind of assess the rosters that have been for a while now. There's no question the backup quarterback is one of these overarching themes that will carry, I think, into the postseason even a little bit, and certainly into our offseason discussions as we try to assess maybe some of those players bouncing around a little bit, maybe some of those guys vying for starting quarterback pay or mid-level quarterback pay, whatever we're going to call it. To me, that's definitely one of the carryovers. I hate to get back into this and beat the dead horse, but as I'm sitting here working on 2024 rosters, I'm even more concerned about running backs, man. I mean, we're going to lose the Derrick Henrys of the world, I think. Even Alvin Kamara is a bubble player. One of the bold themes that I'm taking into my offseason is Christian McCaffrey going to be the only man 10 million plus as a running back going forward, literally starting in March? I mean, there's a world where that exists. Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry all fall off that train. And then who picks up that slack? Is it the backup quarterback that takes on that kind of money? Is it, are we going to pump even more money into the secondaries as this passing NFL scheme even takes more flight? And then here's one to talk about. There's been a lot of good wide receiver play over the years, and I don't think this is being discussed enough. I've tried to bring this conversation up a couple times for the past few seasons, especially more towards draft time. And I know you've probably dove into it yourself, Brandon. We're seeing a dozen young wide receivers every year come in and make an impact immediately. It's not like they're sitting back. And even if there's even the Quentin Johnsons of the world who haven't gotten there yet, with a couple of guys ahead of them in the depth chart, they're going to be impact players within the next 18 months. What's that going to do, financially speaking? Eventually, there's going to be a breaking point, right? Justin Jefferson should have had a $35 million contract. He doesn't. And now injuries and Minnesota turmoil kind of have that whole situation in flux, right? Tyreek Hill has played out every dollar of his contract already. There's no question about that. So there's still some good here. But I just wonder, as we progress more and more and certainly get to a draft that has another dozen really strong names, is that going to be something that NFL front offices try to dial back a little bit? The singular big wide receiver contract versus, because look, the Bills, the Chiefs, I think to some degree the Rams, big teams, the 49ers are already doing it, are going to have to spread this money around a little bit to amp up their weapons. The Giants need 6 weapons, right? Yeah. So I just think that's something offensively speaking, and I think we'll probably steal more offensively with this episode today. That's something I'm really watching closely, is what happens with Justin Jefferson and what kind of trickle-down effect do we have with wide receiver contracts, especially as rookies continue to make an impact with a lot of value.
It doesn't seem like that's something that's going to take an immediate hold, but wide receivers are becoming a little bit more dime a dozen because the college game reflects the pro game. We're seeing more passing at that level. You're seeing the best athletes in high school want to play on the edge rather than in the backfield, and it takes years for this stuff to take hold. I think we still have enough top tier wide receivers that are in the thick of their prime where teams aren't going to be able to help themselves. You still have about, we could probably rattle off 10 wideouts that are just simply a notch or two above everybody else. As good as Puka Nacua has been, as good as Jordan Addison looks, the guys that play alongside them are still worlds better than they are. Even Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. T. Higgins is a nice wide receiver. That team is completely different without Jamar Chase. So I don't think that that's going to happen just yet, where we see a flattening out of the wide receiver.
Well, let's stick there for just a second. And I know we're probably swinging a little off topic here, but if you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan, actually, you live in kind of the Miami world. You're a Dolphins fan. Tyreek Hill has his $30 million, all right, and it's going to only increase in cash because it's backloaded because it's Drew Rosenhaus. That's just life in Drew Rosenhaus's world. So it's only going to get more expensive from a cash perspective. Are you in the mindset that the Miami Dolphins should now back it up with a $28 million contract for Jalen Waddle? And we can make the same conversation with Cincinnati, they're about to lose, I think, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, and are probably going to opt to pay Jamar Chase $32 million a year over the next couple of months here. What are you giving up offensively to make that one impact, even if he's in the top 1%, like you're talking about? What are you forfeiting to make that contract happen? I've floated out numbers to Detroit fans about Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he's a number one. I mean, he's a legit number one wide receiver. You probably had him in your fantasy world, and you know what I'm talking about here. The proof is there production wise to make him $25 million plus, to put him on an AJ Brown type contract. Detroit fans want nothing to do with that because they have 6 guys right now on that roster, and they could probably, stand to trade 2 of them. So I just wonder where the mindset is, not just fans and fantasy wise, but from front offices. Is Cincinnati comfortable with subtracting 2 to pay 1? I don't know if that's a good plan right now, man. Well,
I mean, in injuries, of course, are going to make that look like a bad idea. But if you have Joe Burrow, how do you not supply him with Jamar Chase, a guy that he even played college ball with? Yeah, you see with Tua. Yeah, he had a great game this past week, and he threw it right back at all of his critics. Good for him, playing really well without Tyreek Hill in the lineup. But come on, like we all know, he's a completely different quarterback with that guy on the roster. I think it's such a cop-out answer, but I think it's so situation specific. How have you built your team, and what does your quarterback really need and want in order to be successful? Every decision you make at the end of the day is about sacking the other team's quarterback or booing your own. And guys like Jamar Chase and Tyreek Hill, they're separators like you can't find elsewhere. I think the dollars are always going to be there for those guys. It's not like the running back position where there's really just one guy that is clear cut above the rest. Tier 1 is one name. If I were to say tier 1 at wide receiver, how many names are we coming up with? And as long as that list is longer than most other positions, I think the dollars will always be there.
It's fascinating, right? Because one of the you talked about storylines from 2023. There's no question one of the big storylines are the lack of weapons for Patrick Mahomes. And we can bring this conversation back to Tyreek Hill. Certainly, they got away with it for 1 year. They didn't this year. They're not getting away with that right now, offensively speaking. So I wonder if there's any sort of regret now in 2023 with that kind of conversation, and where do we go from here, right? What kind of offseason are we going to see in Kansas City to kind of right that ship? Is it going to be an overpay for T. Higgins? Is it going to be that they move up in the first round to get one of these young high-flying players out of the draft? I just wonder what kind of reaction we'll see to that, or is this really how they want to operate? That's how the Patriots operated for a very long time. They would pick and choose their spots and maybe acquire a player via trade. But the fascinating part to me is, I'm sitting here trying to disassemble the Los Angeles Chargers. It's one of my off-season projects, right? And the Chargers were one of the very few teams that paid multiple wide receivers $20 million plus per year. They're also doing it with edge defenders too, by the way. That's all going away, and we're not going to have many teams right now operating in that mindset. And I don't think the Bengals are going to be the next team. It seems like they're going to move on, but will Miami, Miami's fascinating, Brandon, because Raheem Mostert has 20 touchdowns, man. This is a running team first, even though they have the highest paid wide receiver in football. So how do you move forward with that, knowing you might have to have the highest wide receiver, the fifth highest wide receiver, and a rushing game that maybe carries 75% of your offense?
I think we've sort of nailed the answer to all of this. And maybe we thought a couple of years ago with all of these wide receiver duos that teams would just start building around those guys. But I don't think that's the right answer. It's you have one anchor at wide receiver, which is kind of an old school method. I'm not going to pay two guys. I'll have Jerry Rice over there on the outside, and then we'll just supply talent around the position. And with the Patriots, like I've used that before, but I think it's a mistake from all of us that analyze that team because they operated the cap in the most fascinating way of any team that we've ever followed, and certainly you in this industry. But Brady always, once they became a passing team, he always had a Hall of Famer to throw the ball to, whether it was Randy Moss or Rob Gronkowski. Julian Edelman came into his own. So they didn't invest a lot in terms of free agency, and they certainly didn't take a lot of stabs in the draft. But Brady, till the end, always had somebody that he could rely on. And having that one guy that we can, like, the 49ers are going to have to choose. Is it Ayuk or is it Deebo Samuel? The Dolphins. Is it Hill or is it Waddle? And you got to pick one because you're right. Once you start paying too much of your roster thins out. And then you just cross your fingers and hope they stay healthy.
Here's the fascinating part about it. I want to give them more credit than I'm giving them right now. Both of those examples you just gave are great ones, right? They're contending teams, high-flying offenses at times. I think we've seen Miami maybe 75% of the time Miami's offense ticks like this. But if it just runs its course right now as it is, with both of those scenarios, Jalen Waddle and Brandon Ayuk, if neither of those guys hold out, which is my big concern because we've seen it now too often. If neither of those guys put down their foot this year and unfollow them on Instagram this summer and go that whole route.
Yes, give me the context.
They can run through the rookie contract and the fifth-year option and stagger perfectly with Tyreek Hill's contract and Deebo Samuel's contract in terms of the guaranteed outs on those deals. In other words, they can get this to the finish line right now with a rookie contract and a veteran contract intact. However, you and I both know, right? Ayuk and Waddle are essentially having career years right now, and they're benefiting from the fact that they're in offenses that can make it all work. I don't think those agents are going to let these players get through the next summer without some sort of payday. And that's where it gets really complicated for good teams and front offices for those good teams is that they're going to force the hand eventually. And at some point in time, one of those two players probably gets traded. They're going to be trade candidates right now, not because of what they're not doing on the field and not because their team doesn't want them anymore, but they can't deal with the pressure of having to go through any kind of public relations nightmare or just simply having a player that's disgruntled and trying to get into 2024's week one with an offense that may be, a notch below where it needs to be because of a contract dispute. You don't want it. You can't have it with good teams, right? You just got to bite it down and either pay the money or get the value back. So that's one of the things I'm carrying into these bubble conversations. It's not just players who, aren't performing to their contract. It's great players that are outperforming their current contract, and their team just simply has to say yes or no in March. And that's a really complicated thing to get into, but it might be one of the better storylines we can carry into March, right? These high-flying players that are stuck on teams that probably don't want to pay them yet, but would pay them in 18 months if they'll wait around.
And so is there a world, because Jalen Waddle is such a perfect example of what you're talking about. And this past week, I think did a lot for him. He was the number one and looked like a legit number one. And it's a reminder to the Dolphins and to anybody else that would be willing to trade for him or pay him that you can build your offense around him as the number one wide receiver. The only reason why he's underutilized is because you have one of the greatest talents ever in Tyreek Hill playing alongside him. Do you think that there is a world where you franchise tag or give a 1 year, like a handshake agreement, 1 year, largely guaranteed deal where you say, we'll take care of you after the season is over? And would an agent even go for that?
See, that's the thing, right? It's extension or nothing. This is year 4 of his rookie contract. You got a 5th-year option, and then you got a franchise tag. So that's what I'm saying. You could, if he plays nice, you could ride this thing out for 3 more seasons with Jalen Waddle and really not have to do too much. I think what you're saying basically is extend him to like a bridge extension, right? And sweeten the pot a little bit for year 4 instead of having him on the rookie 3-year, $4 million contract. It's not a bad idea, but look, he's he's a high flying number 1 wide receiver, and he's going to want his $100 million guaranteed, which is the going rate for the CeeDee Lambs of the world, right? I mean, he's not a Rosenhaus client yet, and I'm going to say yet because I have a feeling there's probably some wink, wink, nudging happening there. But there's a chance that they could sneak something like that in. We don't see it. We saw it with Jordan Love in a very unique instance this past offseason. We don't see these kind of players do bridge extensions. But me, if anybody looking for a short-term high-impact contract, I'm in on that kind of conversation. So if that's what it's going to take to keep this player happy and on this roster for the next 2 seasons, then let's do it. Let's fully guarantee a 2-year rip-up contract, get him out of the rookie deal, maybe even slap the no franchise tag after 2 years on it to make him happy, right? You're going to be able to walk away from this thing after 2 years, but we want you here happy and a legitimate 1B in the passing game for the next 2 seasons. And you just tell us cash wise what it's going to take. It's not good business, but it might be smart business for a contender.
As long as he's willing to go for it. I'm watching, I don't know if you've gotten into it yet, the new Hard Knocks mids. I don't usually, they've only done this for the last couple of years. I'm not really interested. I like Hard Knocks as like something to get me excited for the upcoming NFL season, but it's my squad. So I'm going to watch the Dolphins, and Mike McDaniel's so entertaining. I don't know if you've gotten into that at all.
Did you see the one drive? Is that what you're talking about? The one play drive? Have you seen that video? Yeah. Oh my God, it's beautiful. And Tyreek Hill's all in on it. He knows exactly what's about to happen, and he knows that this guy's the guy that can do it. So look, Waddle's a guy. He's a stud. You trade him to to one of these big flying teams. You put him on the Rams right now and make him the one to Puka. He's a high flying, number 1 wide receiver. So we know where this is going, but it's fascinating to understand that if Tua's going to need $50 million a year and Waddle's going to need $30 million a year, and you've already got a $30 million wide receiver, at some point there's going to be a breaking point. And oh, by the way, I don't know if there's a lot of teams that are going to pay $30 million right now. So it's a fascinating market for an absolute must-have position for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, they go down the roster, start talking to all these different guys, and you're like, how are they affording this? This is an all-star team. So really, it's win or bust in terms of a championship this year for Miami. So let's continue on with these roster bubbles. I'm going to go position by position here, and this is where you can play Grinch for us and tell us who's in danger of getting the boot after the season. I will have you know that I looked back at your article from 2023, the roster bubble candidates. And I think your hit rate was close to like 50%. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
He has some guys that have turned around, like a Joe Mixon, that have come back around into the fold where you go, okay, you're kind of happy with what you're getting there. But
he took a haircut.
Ezekiel Elliott's and all that.
Yeah, he took a haircut to stick around. If you remember, he got an off-season trouble a little bit, and then he took a massive pay cut. So yeah, that's something generally happens if I've identified a player. Mostly it's a cap conversion restructure, but yeah, I put together a full list, which I'll launch here soon on .com, Brandon. But I've also got a greatest hits here ready for you. So if you want to go position by position, I should have a couple of names here ready for you. All
right, we'll start with the QBs. Who do you see as a roster bubble candidate there?
Yeah, the player that I've identified as sort of like the all roster bubble quarterback, I think, is Geno Smith, right? Did Drew Lock put the nail in that coffin Monday night with that unbelievable drive? And boy, the poise and the post-game interview, everything sounded like this kid could take over next year if he wanted to. He's on a 1-year contract, so he's not under contract for 2024. It's not like he's sitting there waiting to take over the reins. Geno Smith is under contract for 2 more seasons, but this was always going to be a 1-year showcase contract. This was always basically, I don't know why he took less than the franchise tag. That doesn't make any sense to me, but he took less than the franchise tag. They can completely get out of this thing before February 16th, which is when the waiver day salary guarantees for 2024. So I think you take the $14 million of cap space. Maybe you re-sign Drew Lock with some of that money and you go from there. It doesn't seem like the 2022 Geno Smith is coming back. And I'd be buyer beware if I'm thinking about keeping him around.
Yeah, he proved himself, a very Baker Mayfield type of season. If you go back to last year, ironically enough, the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay is the guy who was the QB coach for Geno Smith. So Dave Canales is going to be one of those hot names moving forward if he keeps taking these marginal talents and turning them into what he's turned them into.
Right.
At running back, who do you have? I'm sure that it was tough to narrow this list down.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just stood with the big cap hits because, there's going to be guys making $1 million next year. They're going to fall off by the wayside left and right. I'll let you pick. Do you think a bigger loss is Aaron Jones from Green Bay, which does seem like it's a foregone conclusion, or Miles Sanders? Are the Carolina Panthers going to give up on Miles Sanders, even though $6.2 million of his salary next year is already fully guaranteed? It just doesn't seem like they can keep him around. It seems like they're going to have to eat this one. This guy's been a backup running back basically since week 3, even though he was the highest free agent running back contract of the offseason.
How much money do they save do they even save any money if they move off of him?
No, my thinking is,
I don't know. I think they might be too pot committed for this.
Well, my thinking is, do you just eat some of that 6.2 guaranteed and get him off your roster via trade and let somebody else handle him maybe at 3-4 million for 2024? It's possible. They've already admitted everything else out loud. Why wouldn't they just admit this is a mistake as well and try to at least cut some bait, right?
And then the ironic part is that even though I think DeAndre Swift passes the eye test, the Eagles' running game is not as good this year as it was last year. And Miles Sanders was the number one guy. So maybe it was a perfect fit situation or a good contract year for Miles Sanders there. But I'm going to go Aaron Jones of the two. I think that one is, that one's in the stars. He's dealt with too many injuries. He's too expensive. It's an easy one to move off of.
I'm gonna foreshadow a little bit here because I'm into like the linebackers part of the roster bubble piece, and I'm closing in on the secondary. I've got, I don't know, 8 or 9 Packers on this list, which scares me because I'm not sure the Packers are in a position where they want to rip everything off, right, with the Jordan Love and everything, but they could easily move 8 or 9 really prominent names off this roster next year. And I don't know where that leaves them as a franchise, but it's kind of a hit or miss offseason. We'll see. We'll know early where their head is when we start to see, some of these bigger names defensively. I think Bakhtiari and Aaron Jones are for sure off this roster, but they can go a heck of a lot deeper with these roster cuts and really free up some situations for them if they choose to.
Well, they've dealt with a ton of injuries, so they already know what it looks like this year to deal with a depleted roster. And I think all things considered, they've done a pretty good job. What about at the wide receiver position?
I got a lot of names here, right? We could go Michael Gallup, we can go Hunter Renfrow, we can go MVS and Kadarius Toney out of KC. Both, I think, are gone.
Those were all the trade candidates that didn't end up going anywhere.
That's right, yeah. I'm going to give you 2 names again and I'm going to give you 3 names. Ready? I think Mike Williams is a guarantee. I just think the injury stuff has been too damaging. They can free up $20 million in Los Angeles by moving on here. That seems like a foregone. Here's the 2 names. Here's the A or B. Tyler Lockett in Seattle, having a great year, but there's guys on that roster around him, and he's got a $27 million cap hit next year. Or how about Deontay Johnson in Pittsburgh? Man, that dude's been kind of run through the garbage here in the past couple of weeks, right? It seems like that team, that organization is falling out of favor with him. It seems like that happens with Pittsburgh wide receivers after a couple of seasons anyway. They can free up $10 million. I don't know the quarterback situation there too much. Pickens probably could use a few more targets. Of those 2, who's the guy that falls off the roster next year?
Between Pickens and Deontay Johnson?
No, let's do Johnson or Tyler Lockett out of Seattle.
Man, Tyler Lockett's such a beloved figure. I think we'd be looking at more like a restructure there. I don't see him moving on. But Deontay Johnson, yeah. And I don't know what kind of wiggle room they have for George Pickens, but I wouldn't be surprised if they blew up that whole wide receiving unit and just started over. They're not getting – when Mike Tomlin, who is not on the hot seat because he's a legend, he's dealing with effort issues from both of them. That can't be something that, like, right now you do it because – you only have so many guys that you can field, and they have talent. But I could see a world where both of them are off the roster.
Yeah, that's wild. Are both trade candidates then? Is Johnson tradable?
I don't think Johnson is tradable. I think that would be the bubble situation where you just let him go and you eat it. But George Pickens, somebody would take a shot on that talent for sure. I mean, that's something that you talk about a Miami Dolphins, Kansas City Chiefs that just want to add talent to the wide receiver room. I could see both of those teams doing that.
All right.
All right. You want to hit another position? We got to do the defense some justice. So give me a D lineman or a defensive back here.
All right, I'll give you a couple of hot take names here that are going to hit this list and be kind of the forefront of this whole roster bubble article for 2024. I'm worried about Grady Jarrett in Atlanta. Again, I'll talk about a franchise figure. He is the franchise figure, right? Because there's nobody else taking the reins yet, including the coach, including the offensive weapons that should be taking the reins. It's a big cap hit. He's been injured. He tore an ACL this year. He's going to be 31 years old next season. They're going to need some cap room here, right? They're going to have to make some sweeping changes, probably at quarterback as well next offseason. So I do think it's probably time for Atlanta to move on from Grady Jarrett. And here's the big one. I mentioned I've been trying to disassemble the Chargers. I couldn't believe Joey Bosa was in year 5 of this contract already. I think there's a very, very real world where good business says Joey Bosa should be off of this Chargers roster next year. Khalil Mack's having an all-pro year. He's got one more year left. You could let him run out his contract as the premier edge defender on this roster and just put your hands up with Bosa and his injury history and say, forget it. We can't do this. Bosa's got a $36 million cap hit next year, one of the highest in all of football. You can free up over $14 million. If you're just talking Bosa and Mike Williams, that's almost $30 million of cap saved right there via trade or via release. So you're talking about a significant chunk of cap room to deal with to replace these players, whether it's through the draft or via a free agency this offseason. I just think the entire organization needs to step back, both financially and from a football standpoint, and build this thing properly around Justin Herbert. And I know that's a hot take name, Joey Bosa, and certainly he's tradable, but the Chargers really need to think about this because continuing to invest in this player, both from cap and cash standpoint, is probably the wrong business move for them in their current scenario.
This is why we love you, Mike. You're not giving us just any name. You give us Joey Bosa. Are you kidding me?
I know.
That's a heavy hitter. Yeah. Welcome to LA, Jim Harbaugh. Here's a Joey Bosa-less Chargers defense. Have fun.
I do not put my stamp on that endorsement, by the way. I'm not endorsing Harbaugh to the Chargers. I don't like it. I don't like it, man.
Belichick, Harbaugh. You got anybody, any name out there? You thinking? They said they would put all their resources into hiring somebody, which is flies in the face of how they usually handle this stuff.
Yeah, I know. They shouldn't be doing it. They should be dialing it back, not adding. They should be subtracting right now. But, maybe this is one of those scenarios where I've got 10 of their players on this roster bubble list and none of them leave, right? They want to run it back. That's what the Chargers do. It's what the Clippers do, and it's what the Chargers do.
They're caught up in the lights of Los Angeles. All these teams, the secondary teams, the front-running teams. It's just they all get caught up in that. Let's get into our quick hits to wrap up the episode. We're going to take a look back at 2023, and I just want to ask you a couple of overview questions to tie a bow on the year. I'm going to leave a lot of meat on the bone, so bear with me there. But I'll just go with the 3 big sports that we talk about: NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball. I got a question for each. We saw a bunch of quarterbacks sign new deals this year: Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. How has the financial landscape at the quarterback position changed over the course of 2023?
Yeah, huge, right? I mean, 50 million was the hot button number coming into the offseason, and we had 4 or 5 quarterbacks blow it out of the water with 200 million plus guaranteed. So the mountain just continues to climb. It's going to get bigger and bigger. I don't see an end in sight at any point in time. Dallas, anytime the Dallas Cowboys are involved with a quarterback contract, things are about to advance even further. So the name to watch is certainly Dak Prescott. It's in terms of 2024, I think it got a little bit lighter with the quarterback money, right? I mean, I'm not sure Trevor Lawrence gets his contract. I'm positive Justin Fields doesn't get his contract. So it's really about Dak and maybe Kirk Cousins to some degree, and maybe we can talk ourselves into Tua, depending on how the next 6 to 8 weeks go in Miami. But I don't think we're going to have the high impact multiple quarterback contract discussions this offseason like we've had in the past. But certainly 2023 did not disappoint in terms of the big time numbers.
Right. And let's look at the baseball world. When you look back at the year of Major League Baseball, it feels like they took the biggest leap forward of any of the sports with the change to the rules. The perception change around the sports world is that baseball is back. So that was huge. But in terms of the story of the year, was it that looking at it through a financial lens, the team or teams that you think really fascinated you the most?
The rule changes absolutely helped making it a more watchable sport. But the fact that the Texas Rangers spent almost $1 billion over 2 off seasons and then won the whole thing, that's really good. That's good for baseball. I know it seems like it's not, right? You're not supposed to be able to buy championships. You kind of have to in baseball. You know, you kind of have to, and they want you to, by the way. Baseball wants this to be the way it works. They want their off seasons to be more prominent and more, notable, even though they last 6 months, right? Nobody even knows we're in free agency right now because outside of Ohtani's ridiculous contract, it's just sort of like this Peter along process. So the Rangers getting to the finish line with their payroll and now advancing their payroll even more is good. Certainly the Dodgers doing what they're doing this offseason is really good. But I have to play devil's advocate. So many of these teams are facing television, network issues right now. Right. So you've got all these, you've got all these organizations that are ramping up, and I think doing things the right way from a business standpoint. And I'm not even sure if fans are going to be able to watch these teams play baseball outside of, network primetime games or going to the actual stadiums themselves. So I hope the sport gets their S together this offseason with that stuff, because they are in a good spot coming off a nice 2023 season. And there are big boy teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers paying money to get better right now. And they better be ready from a television standpoint to get there.
Yeah, I think Bally Sports might be a little short staffed right now. I noticed this last night. I was watching the Magic game on there on my iPad, and they used to have an option where you could pull down the stats in the background while the game was on. Mm-hmm. That is gone. So they fired whoever was controlling that situation. Well,
let me throw one more thing in here quickly, because the NBA and to some degree the NFL now with the YouTube TV stuff has really advanced their league, whatever you want to call it, league passes, NFL tickets, whatever each league calls it. The NBA's one, to me, is by far the best out there because of the control you have. You can do it day by day, week by week, however you want to handle it. You can log into your phone right now and watch the fourth quarter of any game in the league right now for $1.99. It's just come a long way for the NBA. This is something that Major League Baseball can do themselves. If they up their whatever you call it, I forget what Major League Baseball calls. Yeah, the league-based subscription, so that if I want to watch the Dodgers at any point in time this year, I can do it, even if it's not paying $200, it's paying $5 for a weekend of the Dodgers. I want baseball to take control of this and make it better for the fans in every single market if the local markets themselves aren't going to get their act together.
Yeah, and you've got to allow fans in that market to access their team via streaming. It just frustrates me that you still can't do that. You have to have access to these TV packages. I would love to be able to log into. I have the MLB package, and if I want to watch, and I'm in Orlando, by the way, I'm not in Tampa. I can't watch Rays games.
I know.
I can't watch Marlins games. I'm 4 hours away.
And it's all because of these regional networks, as you know. But if they're failing us, then I want the league to step in and make it better for the fans, because it's just too good of a situation right now, right? Ohtani and the Dodgers, Soto and the Yankees. Some of these big name pitchers are about to move around. A ton of international stars, right? They got to get their act together right now so that these players can be on the forefront and on people's screens 170 plus times a year.
In the NBA, we saw the Nuggets claim a title. Is this the year that we look back on and say, okay, you don't need multiple Hall of Famers in order to win a ring anymore?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's more about depth right now in a league that used to be about super teams, even though there's still some teams trying to run the old school route. And I think because of that, and I'll foreshadow this nicely, I think it's going to be a really active deadline. It never disappoints. The NBA is the trade king in terms of these leagues. But I really do think we're going to see the Bulls completely break it up, and some of these other teams, maybe even the Pistons, hand off some of their young talent, and maybe the Rockets and the Atlanta Hawks get involved as well. I think this is going to be a very active deadline, because there are going to be multiple teams now with the play-in tournament and things like that want to actually bulk up from a depth standpoint and not worry so much about having 2 superstars and maybe 3 shooters and all the things that you needed back in the early 2010s. That ran the league. So yeah, Denver doing it the right way from a draft standpoint, from a free agent standpoint, and from a boring standpoint, right? The old Spurs boring way, I think is coming back into vogue, and that should mean more movement this offseason.
Well, that does it for today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast. If you like the content you hear on this channel, follow, rate, review, subscribe. It goes a long way. We greatly appreciate it. SpotTrack.com. More content coming your way in a matter of moments. for the latest in the contract and transactional world. Happy New Year to all and a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all of that. I guess we'll do this again in 2024, Mike.
You bet. I appreciate your time, man. Happy holidays.
Same to you. We'll see you guys next.